Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cooke, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more. Hi, I'm Rachel Cooke with Brandon Hall Group. Welcome to Excellence at Work podcast. I'd like to warmly welcome our two guests today with me, Kevin Bronk, Vice President, Change and Transformation from BTS. Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Rachel?
Good, thank you. And also with you and with us today, Kendra Okposo, the Director of Change and Transformation of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion from BTS. Welcome, Kendra. How are you?
I'm well, Rachel. Thank you so much for having us.
I'm looking forward to our discussion today. And before we get started, we are going to, our topic today, we're focused on doing change at great speed and scale and the practicalities and realities of AI with both your experiences and the work that you are heading and leading and are involved in at BTS internally and with your clients. I know that you both have a lot to share, and I'm excited to dive into the topic and to learn from your perspectives and to share those with our audience. But before we begin, I would love to learn a little bit more or have each of you share a little bit more about your background and how you got started in the industry and what you're also passionate about, and just to kind of share with our audience today. Kevin, can you share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, Rachel. So I'm been with BTS for about 8 or 9 years now, and a lot of my time has been focused on change and transformation with our clients, whether that's looking at strategic shifts in the business, culture change, often looking at those things in tandem. Prior to my work at BTS, I was working in public education, and I was working in the public charter school space and helping open schools around the country, and was really kind of engaged in a lot of the change conversations around how do we move education forward and help create more equity in the education space. So it's been really fun to look at that work on that side, as well as now look at change with a lot of my clients across software and a lot of other industries.
You were also with Teach for America. That's a very, remarkable organization for the work that they do and how they contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of started my journey in change, as they're really trying to address, the inequities we have in education. And so getting exposed to that world, definitely see a lot of resistance to change, a lot of opportunities in change. And so that work really started to get me to think about what I now do today.
I'm sure that also helps you as you look at learning and how you build your learning and kind of also the differences that schools go through, and it starts with education, right? We start with our early childhood and how we learn and how that continues to change, and yet though it's not necessarily always equal from school to school, area to area. So thinking about that, then you are bringing it into the workplace and how we also embrace different generations in the workplace. So change is quite needed in the challenge, right? And Kendra, can you share a little bit about your background?
Well, I'm currently in San Francisco, and I have been with BTS for a few years. I joined after practicing law for about a decade, specifically looking to lean more into transformation, actually, as I was not seeing as much change as I wanted to in the practice. And I really wanted to get more involved in understanding the science behind change, what makes us tick, what helps us move along, how do our habits change, and how to apply that to equity, to a more equitable spaces and transformation. So that kind of combines my passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, change and transformation, and law. So that's how I ended up with BTS. And I've really enjoyed working with our clients in complex, large transformation work at scale with very diverse employee groups.
And within our awards program, we one of the areas that we ask often for most of the categories that we can apply in, and we have now across 3 programs annually, we have probably 200 plus different categories you can enter in within 7 or 10 programs. So it's quite large and at scale as well. But change management is a piece that we always ask, and we always ask, how are they addressing change management? Because it's so important in order for any initiative for you to be able to implement and to be able to successfully have impact. You have to have that element of change management to be able to persuade or to be able to have your whatever your community that you're implementing this to be able to adopt it. Because if they don't understand the benefits, if they don't understand the need, then how are they going to then want to, if it's not a mandated learning initiative or if it's not a mandated process, how are you going to get them? And even if it's mandated, they may. And again, I know you're going to get into this, but also wanted to recognize BTS for winning 47 Braden Hall Group Excellence Awards, HCM Excellence Awards in 2023. We are going to be launching our winners for 2024 here shortly. So stay tuned for what we have for what we're going to reveal for BTS. But well, thank you, Kendra. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing a little bit about your background. I think it is always helpful for those that may not know you or even know you, just to kind of understand what drives you and why, to understand kind of your experience and why you're so passionate about this topic. Kevin and Kendra, I'm curious as to, how do you think about change in today's business environment, and what does it look like at BTS?
That's a great question. And I think when we step back, we kind of frame that change has changed, right? If you see how business cycles are moving, we've now seen AI, as you mentioned earlier, is becoming this really big disruptor and this thing that's kind of shaking a lot of different industries and making a lot of businesses turn inward and think about how do we be more profitable? What can we do in process improvement? How can we engage our customers different? Are there new revenue opportunities? That's one of many different changes that we've seen. And COVID provoked a lot of different changes in businesses. But I think what we're seeing is just changes happening faster and faster. And so the idea of how we engage leaders in change probably needs to look a little bit different too. So really thinking about change as this continuous cycle. It's something that creates a source of opportunity, something we really try and work with our clients to think about change a little differently. And I think one frame that I like to ground on is moving a little bit from even the idea of change management, which is thinking that change is something to be managed, for sort of change leadership, right? And thinking about how do we actually lead change and how do we create conditions where leaders in our company are able to succeed in change, is where a lot of our work at BTS has been grounded in the last few years.
I was just going to add or double click really on Kevin's shift from change management to change leadership. It's one of the reasons I was so attracted to BTS, because it really encompasses that change has changed, and frankly, including the massive amounts of diversity now in the workforce, the massive amounts of innovation that are so rapid and changing. So that shift to change leadership, I think, is really, really crucial in we're not trying to get through change anymore. We're not trying to manage it or control it, right? We're trying to lead in it. And I think that is one of the core parts of our perspective around change. And I think it's what makes this work really powerful.
And it's also changing leadership styles, right? And, so even from changing the word management to leadership, it's changing the mindset and how you approach it. Interesting.
Absolutely.
What are some of the key differences between traditional change management approaches to modern approaches necessary for today's rapid change, and going beyond from what just changing the terminology, but how do you tackle this?
Yeah, Rachel, I'll share a little bit of kind of the research that guides our perspective on change, and then Kendra will maybe jump in and share a little bit of how we think about it. But there's three big pieces of research that we try and stay grounded in. The first one is this idea that individual and organizational wide reactions to change are determining factors in whether the change will be successful. So when we're looking at a new strategic shift or culture shifts, it's more about how it's led than about the change itself that often is going to determine whether or not it's successful. And so there's kind of a mindset that we try and work with leaders on, which is this idea that change is continuous, right? It's a source of opportunity, it's a source of innovation, it's a source of growth. And your job as a change leader is really to create the conditions for your teams to be successful in change. The second research point that we stay grounded in is the idea that employees are more committed to changes that they help create. So we really look at change as a human-driven process. We really talk about this idea of authorship as ownership. So how do you create authorship around the change throughout the organization, which doesn't necessarily mean that every leader in the organization is deciding what's going to change, but how do you focus teams on directions and have them author how that change manifests or how it comes to life, is something really important that we try and work with our clients on. And the final research point that is probably not surprising, but we hear a lot with our clients that they see there's some trust challenges happening around change. And what the research bears out is when there's high level and trust in the leaders, employees will engage in change before they even fully understand the plan. And so if you think about how you're leading change, how you're communicating about change, really grounding it in trust can make a really big difference for how effective the change will be.
And based on, kind of pivoting from the research or segueing from the research into your approach and how you, the model that you use, can you, yeah, that's great. For those of you that are tuning in and watching the podcast, here's a framework from BTS's view on transformation. Kendra, do you want to kind of dive into what exactly is this?
Sure, would love to. And I'm just going to describe the visual for folks who are not watching. So on the screen, you have an infinity loop. And we have 4 different sections of the infinity loop. We believe this is our view on transformation, and it reflects the dynamic, continuous nature of change, to be in that continuous infinity loop. So the first part of the loop that I'll talk about is in the top left quadrant. It's called set outcomes. So we work with leaders of organizations to get really clear on the outcome of their transformation, whether it's a change in a strategy, operating model change, whether it's technology driven, people driven, culture. We really work with leaders to describe and align on what the desired outcome is and connect the dots between where they've been and where they want to go and what's possible. And we know what's really important here is that we want to be clear, but not so clear that we plan and plan and plan and actually never act. We forget to execute, right? The outcomes change as we see results. So we need to be setting and resetting here as a part of the norm. So the next part of the flywheel that I'll talk about is called create change leaders. What we know here is that in today's reality, we've talked about this already a little bit, with change is constant, change is changing. Every leader has to be a change leader, in addition to their functional role, in addition to their day-to-day performance. They're responsible for engaging the organization, driving ownership, enacting the change, right? And their day-to-day. So this means we need our leaders to step into a change ownership mindset, right? Where they're committed to refining the priorities, setting the direction, communicating transparently, equitably, and really understand the why of it. The next part of this infinity loop that I'll talk about is called embedding pivotal shifts. So now I'm in the top right quadrant. There are 2 types of pivotal shifts that we see when we work with organization. One is a mindset shift, which I've mentioned a bit already, and another is an organizational shift. So a mindset shift is how we make behaviors instinctual, right? There's a shift for each leader. We identify what your current mindset is about change, about the transformation, and then we shift it to a new one that supports the desired state where you're trying to go. So for example, one common one, and I know we'll talk about in a bit, is moving from a siloed programmatic mindset of my work exists in this square to a more holistic enterprise thinking. How does my work impact cross-functionally impact the larger outcomes? Then the other type of pivotal shift I mentioned, organizational shifts. So these are those critical processes, practices, events, even things like business review meetings that are anchored in the old ways of working that need to evolve and need to shift in order to drive those outcomes. And then the last piece of this flywheel, now I'm in the bottom left, is called sustain ways of working. Right now, how do we sustain this? Changing habits doesn't happen overnight, especially when they're really ingrained. But we believe this can happen quickly, actually, if it's supported well. So one of the ways that we sustain new ways of working is by working with large groups of people together. So this is our work at scale, where everyone practices a similar new habit together. It drives support and it drives accountability. And the shift is accelerated. So anyways, generally, that is our transformation in this flywheel. Again, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But if you can't see it, I hope you could picture it as we were talking.
And we'll make it available in our interview publication post the episode here for those of you that are just listening in. And it's, I think, a very good approach to thinking through the mindset of leaders, and then how do you assess, and then how do you change, but be able to handle change that's occurring outside of your responsibilities, or that may be impacting your initiatives or impacting your execution. And it's fluid, right? You can't just, we're launching this or implementing this new learning system. So we have a very, process oriented approach to how we're going to select, implement, and deploy it, right? And so, but with that, you still have a lot of other things going on that you have to be able to embrace and be aware of, and be able to, be able to successfully navigate continuously in the workplace. And so, can you share some examples that you have in the work that you are doing with your clients using this approach?
Yeah, Rachel, absolutely. And one just quick kind of reminder on this, right? One of the reasons why we have it as an infinity loop is the idea is it is not only constant, but it's also not necessarily step 1, 2, 3, 4. It throughout the process, as you're engaging change leaders, as you're starting to look at embedding pivotal shifts, sometimes the outcomes shift a little bit as well. And so it's, making sure teams don't feel like it's like, here's the change plan, here's what we're going to do. Because things are going to shift in the moment, right? Whether we're implementing a new system or a new strategy, we're going to learn from our customers, we're going to learn from our users, and that's going to change things along the way. So we want leaders to be really conscious that this is not a discrete, beginning, middle, and end. And one example of that is a big med tech company that we've been working with for a number of years. And one of the big shifts that they really wanted from this woman who's leading the commercial group for them and kind of their go-to-market arm is that they, as an organization, needed to really shift to become more customer-centric. So they have a consumer-facing device. It's really powerful. It does amazing things. But they are often talking with doctors. They're talking with payers. They're not really actually talking with the end user. And this leader realized in order to sustain high growth and continue to really penetrate customer segments and get a lot more reach, they needed to get closer to the customer. And so we worked with kind of the senior leadership team to actually craft, well, what is the vision for customer centricity? What will it look like for us to be customer centric? And we did that across kind of the senior leadership group. But instead of sort of taking that vision and then just launching it in a town hall, we really zoomed into that idea of creating change leaders. And so we built what we called working sessions with every leader in the group. So we had sessions of about 30 folks, and across multiple sessions, we shared the vision with them, but then we started to talk about, well, what would success look like from your perspective if this vision were to be true? What are the risks or the things that would get in the way? And through those working sessions, we were actually starting to identify not only what are those outcomes, so those leaders from manager and director level, were actually having some authorship and some input on what success looked like from their perspective, which shifted a little bit of what the vision was. And the vision evolved a little bit after those sessions based on the input. But also, what are the big shifts that we as an organization need to make? So the group of leaders were actually identifying, well, if this is what success looks like, and if this is what can get in the way, well, this is the shifts that we need to make as an organization. So now they're walking away from these sessions with some ownership over the shifts and some ideas on, well, what do I need to do in my part of the business or in my segment, my boxes, as Kendra said, that will allow us to make this enterprise shift. And through that, we've seen a lot higher levels of engagement in the change from leaders. We've seen higher levels of engagement from the front line. Other parts of the organization haven't had quite as much of a lift as we've seen from this specific group, which has been really powerful. And through all of this, we've also been sort of teaching change capability, and sort of the training element of change was kind of embedded into this work. So helping leaders think about how to lead this change more effectively was part of it, but it wasn't treated as a separate thing. So we were really diving into the change while at the same time allowing leaders to sort of learn new ways of working, in invitations to shift mindsets and try new change tools that would help their teams be successful in the change. So that's really kind of clicking in on kind of those setting outcomes, creating change leaders, and starting to sort of identify those pivotal shifts. Kendra has a really fantastic example of kind of moving a little bit from that creating change leaders to embedding those pivotal shifts and doing it in the flow of work. So in a way that we can really bring that to life.
I have a quick question for you, Kevin, before it goes. What so that approach and working with your client, how long did it take you? And also, how do you reinforce to make sure what is kind of the process in engagement over time for something like this to be sustainable?
Yeah, it's a great question. So from going from the vision to sort of engaging change leaders and identifying those pivotal shifts, we did that in about a month and a half. So we did really quick working sessions. We kind of organized them very quickly. We got leaders together. Obviously, they're scheduling and figuring out how to get leaders in the room. That was the hardest part of this process, but we can move really fast on these things. So that was about a month or so. And then immediately following that, we actually had the managers have meetings with their teams about the vision. So they were engaging their leaders there. And that was about another month or so that work came through. And from that, we sort of took all of the data that came from both the leader sessions as well as the sessions they had with their teams. And we went back to the leadership team and started to sort of draw up strategies that would help accelerate the change. And we've been continuing that work for the last year and a half, and we're continuing to see a lot of progress.
Kendra, can you your example?
Happy to share and kind of pick up on what Kevin had mentioned earlier about the fluidity of this work and how we approach it, especially in as we're thinking about embedding pivotal shifts and outcomes may change. So I worked with and I'm still working with a manufacturing company that grew dramatically based on acquisition. So they had a lot of different operating models, a lot of different ways of working. And they really wanted to come together and have one operating system. And they started with an ERP implementation. And so they had their outcomes. We came in, we didn't come in at the beginning necessarily, right? They'd done a lot of work at the start. And so we came in to say, okay, we want to do some work on creating change leaders. We identified a list of mindsets that they wanted to shift to ensure that the transformation would be more successful, as we've talked about that being a leading indicator. And then as we started to learn more and roll out some change readiness courses, really that's what they were at the start, we realized that they weren't sticking. And we had to pivot because folks were already quite overwhelmed with the amount of work they were doing, right? With this task of please perform your day-to-day and be a part of this large-scale transformation. So when we got to embedding pivotal shifts, we said, we need to do something differently. We don't necessarily want to have separate standalone training around change readiness. We want to embed change readiness mindset shifts and capabilities into your day-to-day work. So we identified intact teams that were already meeting to discuss the system implementation and how can we add just a little bit of content to build resilience and shift mindset around change. during those conversations. We added change readiness content to onboarding, to safety briefings, to shift handovers on a manufacturing floor. So we got really creative about how to talk about and really embed change readiness mindsets and capabilities into the flow of work, so as it wasn't seen as separate. It was seen as a part of the transformation. That was a really key part to making this work stick.
And the courses, these are all customized, right, to content that is specific to their training needs. It's not off the shelf or general content on change readiness, right?
Right. We, after, some time with what we call discovery, where we work with a client and really get to know what's underneath their resistance, perhaps, to that transformation, what's getting in the way. Then we customize the courses to build the mindset shifts that are really needed and the capabilities that are really needed, but also directly connected to the transformation at hand. So we're not just talking about resilience for the sake of resilience. We're talking about resilience because we've identified some burnout, some change fatigue. And so we need to build up that capability. And folks need to be able to support each other through these constant transformations, right? We're not just talking about engaging resistance for the heck of it, right? We're talking about it because we've identified some significant barriers in the way folks respond to change. So we really equipped leaders in the flow of their work to engage others who might be resistant to change.
And are you getting a lot of pushback on the use of AI with your clients, or how to incorporate it into your courses or your courseware development? And everyone's doing it. So I'm curious to see, this piece with change transformation, because this is so, they're like go hand in hand.
Yeah, they definitely do. And it's funny you said a lot of my work is also in AI. So I kind of get to spend time in change transformation and AI, because there's one thing all of our clients are facing right now is in change, which is AI. And there's two points I'll make here. The first one is, in terms of the research on change, one thing we look at that's a little bit of uncommon sense is resistance is actually data, right? And resistance means people are getting it. So if you're in an organization right now where people are not worried at all about AI, they probably are not clear on how disruptive AI is going to be to your business. So one of the first things we're doing with a lot of our clients around AI is we are trying to engage the resistance a little bit and allow leaders to get out what are they worried about as it pertains to AI. And you'll see a lot of the big picture stuff as far as, the headlines that you'll see around it, taking jobs, can we trust it, hallucinations, you see a lot of that stuff. But as you get a little deeper, you start to actually get to what people are really, really worried about with their business, which can actually bridge really nicely into, well, these are the opportunities that we can really think about AI in a way that's going to be responsible for our organization. So those concerns become a good starting place to figure out, how do we want to ethically approach AI? What are the type of projects we want to do with AI? How do we want to engage our people with AI? What are we willing to let AI do? And what are some of the things that are really important that we keep our people focused on? And that can help kind of engage that resistance and get people to understand that vision a little bit more. And then it's, small moves. It's starting experimentation and starting to find areas where people are getting comfortable with generative AI, playing with generative AI, and sort of seeing the opportunity so that they can start to really think about strategically what are the big shifts that the business can make.
It's just letting them play around with it and letting them become used to it and kind of see how it works and how transformative it is and how helpful it can be. But I think also the concern is the risk and what's next. And for those that are not as involved or close to using it, for content purposes or for their job necessarily just yet, because I think at some point everyone is going to be using it if they're not already in some capacity.
Yeah, Rachel, and that's what makes AI such, I think, a unique, disruptive technology, and that every executive out there knows their company needs to be doing something with AI. but they're not all comfortable with what that is or how do we do it. I don't know that we've seen that with any technology shift in recent history. So it's definitely one that is really interesting to explore change with, as well as just the technology itself is fascinating and kind of the opportunities that it builds.
And as we wrap up the year, we always produce an HCM Outlook study that focuses on leadership and priorities that HCM leaders and professionals have, and how they're going to focus their initiatives or their resources for the following year. Are you seeing a big focus on generative AI or change at scale?
Yeah, I think those are two areas that a ton of our clients are coming to us with questions about. AI specifically, we have an organization we're working with now that we're running AI courses for their entire leadership team, and then we're moving to their director population. And the woman who's kind of leading their AI efforts, she said in a session we were running last week, she's like, "This is the first time in the history of this company. This company's been around for almost 100 years." That we have brought senior leaders together for in-person training on a technology. Never done that in the history of the organization, but they just realize how big of a moment this is. And the sessions have been really fun. Like, leaders are really leaning into it and they're really curious. And so that's making them work really well. As far as, the question on change and transformation broadly, absolutely. I mean, the disruptions in the market are happening left and right. So often what we hear from our clients is around, we need to build more resilience. We need to build more capability around change. And with that, we are really trying to help our clients shift from building capability because they know it's important to anchoring that capability building and actually accelerating a real transformation. So it's immediately applicable to leaders, and it also accelerates business results at the same time.
And as we wrap up today, anything else that you advise talent or that you advise talent leaders on how they can influence change and how they can have a greater impact?
Yeah, Kendra, you want to jump in?
Sure. I mean, we've talked about this a bit, and I think one of the things I've talked to quite a few clients in the talent space about recently is this mindset shift from change training, to embedding change readiness mindsets and capabilities in the flow of work, directly applicable to any transformation. We are constantly in transformation. And so that mindset shift has been really helpful for talent leaders then to get creative and brainstorm about, okay, what are some of the areas that we might be able to support the business without having them all step out and do a separate training? What meetings are they regularly having? What courses are they already taking, right? What conversations are they already having? And how can we build our change readiness skills, build that resilience, build that engagement for resistance within their day-to-day?
There's the opportunity in anytime you're engaging leaders in change to actually get data and get input. So not trying to communicate with them and sell them the change, but really hear their concerns, really understand where they're coming from. That then not only creates a safer space for them to move forward, but also gives your senior leadership teams insight to where folks are at. And ideally that actually informs the strategy, and ideally your strategy evolves because you're getting input from the front line who are actually dealing with the change from day to day. They're the ones talking to your customers. They're the one on the manufacturing floor. So they might actually see things that you're missing if you're a real senior leader. And I think talent has such a great opportunity to connect those dots and really come back to the business with not only more capability and better mindsets from their, frontline or leaders, but also insight into where the organization is at in the change.
Both of you shared some good points here and some great advice and perspective. Thank you for joining me today, Kendra and Kevin. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to learning more as you unfold the work that you do through the great clients that you've been engaged in. So congrats and keep up the great efforts.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us, Rachel. Yeah. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye for now.